Hey guys, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox here with another quick album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new The Armed record, Perfect Saviors. When The Armed released Ultra Pop in 2021, they immediately proved themselves to be one of the most distinct noise pop acts on the entire planet. I mean, sure, they were pretty relevant within their own particular niche beforehand, but that record really had a lot to say, and it still holds up a couple years later. And to be totally honest, I greatly enjoyed that record, which is why it really pains me to say that that album's follow-up, Perfect Saviors, leaves a lot to be desired, tragically, even though it kind of manages to hold its own, sort of-ish. I mean, hey, it could never be said that Perfect Saviors loses the noisy touch of its predecessor albums. I mean, The Armed are through and through a noise-based pop band and rock band, and you know what? That's all here. Dense walls of noise, distorted guitars, pounding drums, etc., etc. Everything that you've known from The Armed, all of these different elements that have primarily made up a lot of their past music, it's still here, just in a different, weaker form. And that's because the biggest issue here isn't the base elements of Perfect Saviors, it's the context that the noise and that the performances are placed in. It's because this record, rather than sticking to some of the more straightforward hardcore influences that The Armed have dealt with in the past, it moves into a much softer territory that just doesn't work out that well. The album tries to be a little bit more post-hardcore structured, especially melodic post-hardcore specifically, and you know what, conceptually it's not a bad idea. I mean, not every band has to be the exact same thing forever. In fact, most bands change pretty quickly from album to album as long as your name isn't AC/DC, so you know what, it's to be expected that The Armed would do something new 2 years after their last full-length LP in the studio, and I mean, it's new, that's for sure. The Armed on this record utilize a more anthemic and, in my eyes, lightweight style that doesn't pack the same punch as the kind of sounds that were found on some of their previous records. It's this sort of hands-in-your-air, chant-along post-hardcore that other bands such as Fucked Up do that I just can't really get into. I mean, hey, there certainly is something to be said about the pretty decent wall of sound kind of production found on this record, even if it might be a little overbearing from track to track, and admittedly some of the melodies on songs like Everything's Glitter are pretty strong overall. That aforementioned track in particular's general vibe is almost sort of 90s Britpop-esque, kind of a lost Oasis track in nature, but that doesn't really make up for what's otherwise, in terms of energy and in terms of memorability, a lackluster record. Having the wholly forgettable indie rocker Public Grieving close out proceedings really just puts a limp ending onto an already limp record. It's sort of like the wet paper towel of music endings for albums, at least. It's just kind of a disappointing ending for an album that already does not have the same staying power that much of what The Armed has done in the past has. I'm not saying that I wanted The Armed to stay the same forever. They are just inherently not a band that are going to stay the exact same from album to album, and I think that's a good thing for artists like themselves. But at the same time, I feel like just making a breezier, slightly poppier, and significantly less interesting version of music that they've done in the past was not the right direction to go in. Look, if you really want me to sum up The Armed, not only on this record, but just as a band in general, they are an essential name for anybody interested in noise-based and noise-adjacent music. And in their best moments, no one can really create a sonic whirlwind like The Armed can, or at least very few within the modern day. But in their weaker moments, they are just a nothing burger of an indie rock band that don't really have anything going for them. I mean, a lot of this record is just your average indie Bandcamp find, just with 20,000 distortion pedals added to the guitars, and that does not make a good album. The band just have so little to say here in terms of creativity, in terms of uniqueness. There's just not a lot going on here. The Armed are far from making a straight-up bad album here, but at the same time, they're equally far away from making anything even remotely memorable. I'm going to give this record 2.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this quick album review. I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.